Today we dive into the top 8 PGA Tour Mishits, uncovering the mysteries behind those unexpected twists on the golf course. From shanks to hooks and slices to tops, these mishits can happen to even the most seasoned pros, often at the most crucial moments. But why do they occur? Is it a lapse of concentration, a technical flaw, or perhaps the pressure of competition? It's all about understanding the mechanics of the golf swing and mastering the mental game under pressure. But today we're going to explain. If you do like this, hit that like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps us grow this channel and get more golf into the hands of needy children in Cape Flats, South Africa. But enough of that, let's learn about the misses of the tour pros. Welcome back, Line Golf Academy members and guests, and as mentioned, we are going to be talking about misses, specifically the tour level misses. Yes, they do miss them. They look like you or I sometimes. We're going to be pretty quick on each one, pick one or two things, but I want to show you what I go through when I have a student that shows up to me and says, I'm suffering from the shanks, I'm suffering from the tops, the pulls, whatever it is, just to go through some checkpoints so you can learn when you see it yourself or when you do it on the golf course, what to look for. So let's start. So here we have a top, and when you see a top from this view, I'm looking at, are you maintaining your spine angle? Where is the path of your hands and your weight distribution? Now, face on, we can really see where the ball position is, but since we don't have a ball position, we're just going to limit it to what we do have. And even though this is not directly behind, we're going to try and do our best to see where his feet are pointed and where that club face would be pointed to. Now, no, that's not exact, but it's close enough. And the great thing about this swing is we caught a ball flight. So based on that ball flight, we have a golf ball that looks like it's starting somewhat to its target line and moving to the right. So that means the club face is probably square to the target, but the path is moving left of that club face. Now we have to determine, why is it moving left and what is causing that? I look at the spine angle and are we maintaining our posture? And keep in mind that this camera angle is a little bit crooked, so even though it looks like his hands are on path here, if this camera was right behind him, they might be a little bit upright and taking that club out. And we can see the head kind of dips forward, so that there might be some centeredness issues, but he does a pretty good job of compensating back into it, and he's pretty close to spine angle. So the next thing I try and check is, where is that centeredness of his motion? So we go from the arches of the feet straight up, we're going to draw the lower plane line, and then the spine angle line. So right in that triangle is basically where his center is, and we can see at the top of his swing, his butt of the club does get to the centeredness of his feet, and then it extends a little bit further back. So there could be some possible disconnection issues, which could cause some reconnection issues. But as he comes down, you can see those hands want to pull down, and then the rotation happens, but you can see it's slightly steep and the exit path is going left. But thankfully, with this view, we got a face on of the same swing. Here's a face on, and they're caught about midway back, so we won't be able to get the setup, but we can see that there is some disconnection from this frame to this frame. And whenever you have your arms pulling back a little bit further, there might be some issues at disconnecting. And we can see that club, if this is where his feet are aiming, that club does tend to cross that line, which now the club head weight is falling in front of him. So what this might cause is a little reconnection, and it does appear like he falls slightly back, but it's really hard to tell from this view because it doesn't cold top. It definitely catches it on the upper equator of the golf ball. So this one is a tough one, but I just wanted to show you what I would go through to see what the cause and effect was, and maybe you can start to look for that. Now that we have learned from the last video, we're going to see another top from that same down the line camera, and what we can start to see is, again, do we fall back? How is our reconnection issue? So if you have limited footage, at least from any point of view, you can try to get some ideas. Now the difference with this one is you can see that there's ground before the golf ball. You can see that divot behind us. I don't know, we've all hit the shot. It's not uncommon. It does creep up every now and then, and even the best in the world do it. Now when I'm looking at this, I want to take away all the obvious. So I'm looking at the posture, so let's see how balanced that posture is from the arches of the heels up and the spine angles. It looks pretty balanced, so it's probably not a weight distribution issue. Top of the swing, let's look where that club is pointing. So the shaft is pointing down the line, so it's not a rerouting issue. As we come on due, we do see a tilt. Look at that right shoulder tilting down, and that might have gotten his upper body stuck on his right side. And when you get your right shoulder to tilt down too soon, your weight shifts back, and we can definitely see him hanging back a little bit too much. He's making contact with earth before the golf ball. So this doesn't look like it's much of an issue. When you start making severe contact issues, it is probably a weight distribution issue caused by your shoulder tilting or not tilting enough, and then you start to lose the control of your centeredness. So if I were to guess this one, if we had a face on view, you would probably see that upper body falling back and hanging back on his right side a little bit too much, as they are trying to hit up on the golf ball, but this might be a little bit too far up. It's so far up, it's down. Okay, the next one that we've all probably done before is the dreaded smother hook, and we all know that feeling. You feel like you just compress the hell out of the golf ball, starts straight, and then all of a sudden just moves viciously left side. So what is causing that? Let's break this down. And remember, we're always looking for path and club face relative to the path, but it always has to be on an alignment. So we need to know where you're aiming, which is why your coach will always ask you to choose a target, because nothing's worse than saying, where are you aiming? And the student says, straight. There's no such thing as straight. Pick a target. So the foot line is pointing about here, and that means the club face line will probably be pointing about here. So let's draw a straight line to that ball flight, and let's see what happens once we strike that golf ball. And we see that, yeah, look at that. It's like forming its own shadow. So he's pretty close to, again, his club face is probably square to his target, but his path is right of his target. So knowing that, what we're going to do is kind of draw a makeshift line, and let's do this in red and kind of draw where we think his path will go to cause that hook. And if we slow it down, we can see that that club head definitely veers outside of that initial ball flight. So we can see that this is a path issue and that real long extension out. So why are we doing that? Let's back it up and see if we can find the cause for this. So his spine angle, his lower plane, and his arches are all meeting in the middle, so it looks pretty balanced. We can see that this is definitely a more upright motion, and he starts to stand up to make some room, and we see that the shoulders are leveling out, the hands are getting much higher. He crosses the line slightly, and let's look at what happens to his rerouting. So it is slightly steep here, and what is he going to do to help shallow it? I went back and drew a green back brace line so we can see. So some possibilities here as we look at Barney purple line, we can draw from the butt of the club straight down. It is definitely in front of his swing center, so there might be some issues. So he has to reroute this thing. He drops it down. He does a pretty good job right about here. Now all of a sudden that club is slightly steep. Now to counteract that, he probably has to feel like, I've got no room. I've got to get my arms out and away from my body to try and strike this golf ball. And now what we do is look at the lower body, look at the footwork. So the footwork is doing a pretty decent job. He's coming off the right toe, but he's receiving that weight more in the middle of his left foot. I would imagine he would probably be better off if he can get that weight to the back left heel to provide some better room and hold that spine angle. But because we're in this position here, you can see that right hand has to really extend outward to try and keep this club on a fighting chance to stay on plane. Look at the spacing between his hands here and here. See how they get a little bit further away as opposed to riding a little bit closer with his turn. So this might be a delayed turn with the shoulders due to tilting increase to try and get that club back down quicker. So if we take a look just past impact here, what we can do is get our favorite little shoulder tilt check. And let's see that angle. That angle is a cool 56. And let's see what it was at the top of the swing here. So he went from 27 to 56. That's 30 degrees of tilt. So it looks like the club was stuck a little bit too high. He tried to tilt under to get those hands to get a fighting chance to go from in to out. And with that excessive tilt, it's going to carry your arms right of the target, which it did. And that'll give him that path right with a square club face. And that is where Mr. Hook comes in. Okay, next one up is not quite a shank, but it's pretty close to a shank. You can still see the divot is up ahead. And if you look at the divot, notice how the divot forms right of the golf ball. It's not even close to where the golf ball is. That could be the sign that the toe is actually digging into the ground and maybe opening the club face, which is a possibility. But let's take a look at what is going on with his motions to cause this miss, which unfortunately looks familiar for a lot of us. So let's check where his foot line is. Golf ball is going to be slightly round. I'm trying to do my best 3D envision. So let's take a look at where that golf ball definitely starts way right. You can see that that golf ball is kicking off in this direction. Now, what would cause that? Obviously, we're looking for a plane issue. So I'm looking at the plane. The plane doesn't look too bad. It just looks like a contact issue. But let's see why his toe might have been digging in the ground. And once we do a centeredness check, you can see his centeredness might be off the toes a little bit. Let's see, does he recover from that at all? And when we get to the top of the swing here, you can see that that butt of the club is definitely out in front of his centeredness. Now, this could cause some issues, specifically with slightly steep. Because his weight's stuck on the toes at the starting position, you can see as he transfers into it, he's starting to lose his posture slightly, and you can really tell where this spacing is on the back yellow brace line, and we're going to draw where the new brace line is in orange. So you definitely see some motion towards the golf ball, and when there's motion towards the golf ball, your hands will either have to reroute and pull down quicker. But if you go to the top of the swing here, we can see that that does not happen. The hands are just dropping naturally while the shoulder turns and tilts, so he's essentially running out of room as he strikes the golf ball. Now what this could cause is if we go to impact here and we're going to draw a little box around his hands, let's take a look at where they started to where they finished. So there's definitely upward motion, which is good. You want that upward motion, and we also will have some motion towards the golf ball just to favor some shaft drooping, but I see a lot of motion up and to the right, which usually means that the compression of the body is going into the golf ball, which straightens out your spine slightly, and I think it stems from weighting too much on the toes. And when that happens and you're trying to release that club head, you are now so flat that the toe is going to drive into the ground first, and when you make contact with the toe like you see here, that this could just have been a spacing issue, and he definitely is finishing with a lean this way with his weighting still stuck in his toes. So I would be focusing on a posture setup change. I know we've all felt this one where you feel like you pured the golf ball, the divot is beautiful, but all of a sudden that ball goes dead right. It's probably hitting either the toe or the hosel, one of those two. Let's take a look at what is going on with this one. So the way he's set up with alignment, that looks pretty decent. Let's look at his centeredness. So he looks pretty centered. Here, it looks like there's a stall out of turning. So his hands are way out in front of his centeredness. Now, when you have this much spacing in front of your centeredness, that could be a lack of turn. Now, it could be turning because he is tilting on the way back as opposed to turning. And we might see evidence of this. Look at that left knee really buckling this way. And that could be as well because the hips are also buckling with their tilting. So we do see a pretty deep tilt of the hips as opposed to a little bit more turn. So right now we see his hands out in front here. So with a little bit more turn with his hips, the possibility of getting his hands closer to his center point as he drops it out. Now he has to unwind, and for him, because he didn't turn far enough back with his hips, you can see that his hands are immediately very steep. Now he's a really good player. Really good players try and feel that and try and save it. So what is he trying to do? He starts to stand up ever so slightly here, and he works with what he has to. He gets that club pretty close to the plane, but it's still pretty high above the plane, and now it's just anybody's game, and he gets those hands to help him out to try and save it, and the hands don't quite catch up in time, and this is what causes that shank. Now let's remove all these lines and see if we can make out where he hits it. It's most likely on the hosel, because you can see that shaft is pretty close to that golf ball, so that is unfortunate. He was really close to saving it. If you find yourself in this position, don't start changing, moving further and back. Just make sure you're taking a deep enough turn to allow your hands to get to your center points, or even behind your center points to get the extreme opposite. So you might hit it a little bit heavy, but at least you're not going to shank it. All right, this one might look a little familiar to most of us. We set up, we think we're going to pipe one right down the middle. It starts out pretty straight, and all of a sudden, see you later. And you notice those leaves are hardly moving, so there's probably a little bit of a breeze, but not much. So we can't blame it on that. We can't blame it on those moving people left side. We can only blame it on one thing, and let's go find out what that is. Unfortunately, this replay started midway in his back of his swing, so we have this to work with, but let's just take a look at where that ball flight is going. So yeah, it's kind of following that shadow. It's pretty close to his D-plane, and the D-plane is, you just extend that out, and this is your D-plane. So let's see what happens after he strikes the golf ball. You can see it's curving right. So again, club face is pretty square. And you notice this with the good players is they usually started on line, but then their misses happen in the air. So that's usually a path issue with the club faces pointing pretty square to the target. So we know that this path is coming left of his target line. So now that we know that, let's back up and see why is that path going left. And let's draw a line from the butt of his club straight down, and you can see it's pretty close to his center point, so that's pretty good. So we see that sitting motion, and we see the turn from the upper body and the lower body, but we can extend this line out. We can see that we've got some issues. We've got to figure something out, or we're going to miss that golf ball. So what happens is the right shoulder definitely starts to work under a lot, so he's going to cover this golf ball. And when the right shoulder goes down, possibly the momentum of that downward tilt will allow the hands also to exit left a little bit early, and this is my best guess with this one. And what we could do is let's look at how much extra tilting he did establish on his downswing. So we're looking at a rough 32 degrees as we get down to impact. So look at that. Now all of a sudden we have more than double the tilt. So there's definitely some tilting issues, but this could just be his swing. Now remember, for good players that have reached this pinnacle and they do have a slightly non-traditional move, unfortunately with that non-traditional move, you are going to miss it. Now the key thing is we got to control our misses. Now obviously this one is not controlled. This is going way right. But when you have path issues, again, look at your posture, look at where the hands are at the top, look at how much turn you get. Are you providing a clear spacing for your hands to move naturally without any compensatory motions? And here we have Rory. Now, Rory, look at this again. The miss starts pretty straight to their target, but then all of a sudden, look at that curvature. So we know that we've got some issue with our path. Our path is right of that curvature. This is most likely coming down to a plane issue. So let's see, why was that plane slightly right? Now remember, this is eyeballing it. I don't have the numbers in front of me or the face on camera, so it's hard to tell with just one side, as ball position could play a part in this. And we don't really know what the face angle on the path is. We're just taking best guesses on evidence that we can see, which is most of us at home. So let's look at where the feet are pointing, and the club face is probably pointing right parallel to that. And does it run down it? And we can see, boom, look at that. It's just perfect. The shoulders look slightly open. This could have something to do with it. Maybe you have to feel like you have to square up his shoulders in his golf swing and maybe tilt it too much. But let's take a look at his plane work and see what happens on the way down. So the club looks like it's on plane, and in between those two frames we can see that that club wants to stay on plane. It doesn't dip down below. It's unfortunate we don't have an extra frame in between there. And if we look at the exit path, we can see that the arms do extend a tad bit further out away from the body. So it's possible this could have been a path issue caused by the body, but it could also be the ball position. Maybe that ball position might have also been in the wrong spot, which will cause your path issue at contact. Your path will get adjusted based on where you hit the golf ball off your left foot versus your right foot, and you take that same swing. The same swing could produce different paths depending on when that ball is made contact with. So this was me hitting golf balls and watching myself. It doesn't look like there's too many issues. It could be a possible open shoulder at the setup, which will cause you to counteract that in your golf swing, and it could also be a ball placement. So check those two things first before you start tinkering with your golf swing. This last one might be the hardest one to diagnose just because it doesn't have a face-on view. It doesn't have a down-the-line view. We're looking at a crooked view, but what we're looking at is weight distribution. We're looking at point of contact. You can see it's slightly heavy. I know that this ball finished high right and short of that bunker on the right side. So let's look at why, and can we diagnose this with the limited tools we have and the limited camera angle. It's hard to tell where the weighting is just because it's at that weird angle. It appears like his hands are very close to his thighs, but it's probably not the case just because we are at that strange angle. But let's look at the top of the swing here. We do see some narrowing of the hands. The hands get a little bit too close to the chest. You can see how close that left arm gets to the chest with such a short swing. Some possible weight distribution issues here. As we come on down three, he does a pretty good job of staying in his posture. Pretty good job of staying against that back brace line. We can see that that club does get a little bit shallow on the way down, and he strikes the earth a little bit too heavy because this one landed in the water and right at the target. So this is most likely a path issue, with the path being a little bit too shallow on the way down, getting stuck, which will cause some hand-arm manipulation at impact. We can see right here, but it appears that there might be some hand manipulation at impact. Even though his body's trying to turn, it just looks like those hands are a little bit too engaged. And believe me, there's a lot of pressure on that shot, and anytime you have pressure, it is going to accentuate your issues. Hope that helps you. This is a quick cause and effect for the misses on tour, and yes, they do miss it. They are like us. So if you do enjoy that, hit that like, share, subscribe. But other than that, I will see you next time. Fairways and greens.